We've always been told that good care speaks for itself quite often, but the reality now is that's really not enough. And when an inspector walks into one of our care services, they're not asking for us to tell them how good our care is, but they're actually asking us to show them how good our care is. And they want to see that fairly quickly, really clearly, and with confidence. And we've seen this across our care services over the years. And you can have a great team, a great culture, and be providing great outcomes. But if we can't evidence it in that moment of when an inspector knocks on the door, that can sometimes lead to uncertainty and lead them to draw some of the wrong conclusions. So today's conversation is an exciting one, and it's about how we can use an inspection as a real tool and lever to show how we are delivering outstanding care and good care through data to our inspectors and for our residents. And I'm delighted, as ever, to be joined by Robin, who will host today's conversation, and a very special guest today, Kevin Humphreys, the CEO of the Oakland Care Group, is joining us for some of his thoughts and reflections. Thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us. Robin, I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samir. Kevin, I'm going to jump right into that. Samir mentioned that we're not being asked to talk about what we're doing now. We're increasingly being asked to prove what we're doing. And I wondered if you could give us an example of that. What's that actually like? Who is the inspector asking, and what are they asking for? And how can that be? What's the best type of response to that question, do you think?
So I think the inspectors today, they don't want to ask you what you're doing necessarily. They want you to know that you understand it, but they want to see the evidence that that's what's actually taking place. And often what they're actually looking for is evidence of data, trends, audits, and what you're doing with that information. They don't just want to see what they used to see, which was they wanted to see a policy. They want to know, is that policy happening? Is it working? And if you tell them, yes, it's working, actually, that doesn't mean anything if there's no evidence that actually you can demonstrate where, you've got a false policy, you've got a false trends analysis, you've identified the residents that are actually affected most, and you've taken some steps to resolving that.
And the person who is asked that question needs to be able to respond, I suppose. That they can't necessarily come to you and say, oh, well, I'll just go and ask Kevin.
Oh, no, in fact, we had our CQC inspection last week at one of our care homes, and it was my annual leave day.
Oh, no.
Of course. I mean, I think they must have known. But anyway, so I spoke to the manager, and she was perfectly content that she had everything that she needed and was pulling everything ready in advance. And so, yeah, you're right, actually. That's a really good example. The person that is present needs to be able to find that information, that data, and that evidence. And you need to do it with the least amount of friction as well. You need to be able to grab it. If you're looking in 6 different places to demonstrate a piece of evidence, then actually that's not great.
Wow, so the timing of this is very prescient then in some ways.
Couldn't have been better, actually.
Can you just tell us, Kevin, a little bit about your services and about you, because you run a number of very successful services, I know, but you also do more than that in our sector.
Of course. So, I have an organization that I'm the chief executive of called Oakland Care Group. It's a family-owned business, and it's been around for over 30 years. It's got 2 care homes, which is Oakland Court and Oakland Grange. They're in West Sussex, on the coast, which is lovely. And I also am one of the directors of West Sussex Partners in Care. I also work across the partners in care within Sussex. But one of my, I guess, hobbies or enjoyments is tech particularly tech and how it can help within the care sector, and AI and how that can help within the care sector, and governance. I enjoy governance. I'm one of those weird ones that do, and that's something I talk about quite often. But I also try to champion the cause of social care generally, widely speaking, because as we all know, it's underfunded. And when something is underfunded, it then means that other things happen as well. So, there's not enough money to pay staff the right amount of money. There's not enough money to invest. There's not enough money for tech. So there's a catalogue, but the first place is that funding. So that's another one of my hobbies.
Oh, well, we're very grateful to you for being here and being able to give that perspective. I think your situation as a relatively small owner of good care homes staffed by good people doing a good job day in, day out, generally speaking, will reflect a lot of the people in our community. But through the other things that you do, you're going to be able to help those providers work through the things that perhaps they're struggling a little bit with. And I think for everybody, delivering good care is what we're really good at, and proving that we're delivering good care feels like a bit of a head scratcher sometimes, doesn't it? And it's your view that's commonly the way things are going. That's what we're being asked to do at the time of inspection.
I think what my experience was when we had our inspectors in. They're there to view everything that's going on. Yes, they want to talk to people, but they only want to talk to people like residents, relatives, and staff. They don't want to talk to the managers so much, and get their sort of point of view. Although there is now a registered manager's interview as part of the whole inspection, which is new. But what they do want, in addition to the time that they come to us for their assessment, as they've now named it, is they want a lot of evidence, all digital. They ask for you to share a digital folder with them with all of the evidence, to cover a lot of areas. I mean, the list was absolutely enormous. Thankfully, if you're already evidencing those things, it's not too onerous. However, if you're asked to evidence something, and you know that you do it all the time, you know your staff are doing it all the time, but you don't have it somewhere digitally or on paper, then as the old adage goes, if it wasn't written down, it didn't happen.
What sort of thing do you think are the most common we might not have that documented areas?
I think the sorts of things that we don't tend to be excellent at in the sector would be, what have we done about something? So let's say, for example, we do all those things to ensure that a person is cared for in a very person-centered way. So we are actually doing those things, but what we're not actually doing all the time is evidencing it. So for example, we'll do an audit, and we'll audit everything, and we'll check everything, etc., etc. Then we'll have a finding. So that audit and those findings will be documented. But then, of course, out of that will become an action. So let's say, for example, there's a resident who has been falling in the early hours of the night. We'll know because we'll have audited the falls. We'll know because we'll have seen exactly who it was, when it was, etc., etc. But then the next step from that is, what did we do about it? Did we put in a night light? Did we make sure that we increased checks? Did we put in a falls monitor, some kind of AI system? And often what we don't do is we don't then actually add to that audit, what did we do to remediate? So we may well have done all of those things, but did we document it?
We're not showing the connection, the reason why we've made changes, or the impact that the changes have had.
Yeah, and I think if we've made those changes, then the following month, what we're hoping to see then is a change in the number of falls. And then from there on in, we want to see, well, was there a change? Yes, there was. Why was there a change? Well, looking back, these are the things that worked. Okay, so that's actually a learning. We know that that kind of thing works. particularly for this individual, and then the following month and the following month. So you keep that trail. I mean, we used to call it, I don't know if we still do actually, but we used to call it the golden thread. So through every piece of documentation that relates to a person, there should be a golden thread that tells the story of that person. Well, that golden thread reaches out of the care plans, out of the care records, and goes into the audit and goes into what the actions following the audit around that person. So it shouldn't just be that an audit is done because X, Y, Z, tick, 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 and that's the end of that. Often what tends to happen is, out of a very natural way, people do things to respond. So they'll have already put in place a lot of the things to address the falls, but did they tie that with the results of the audits? Did they tie that with what followed after that month and after the next month's data as well? And that's actually, that golden thread needs to be seen by CQC so that it's evidenced. And not only actually is that really useful for CQC, but actually that helps us as a provider to recognize exactly what it is we're doing well, what it is that we need to look at to do better moving forward. So there's a lot of really good work going on out there, and we know that, but it needs to be evidenced, and that's what CQC want to see.
So however good your care is at the moment, where an assessor, if that's what they're now called, is looking through some of your documentation and asks you, did you notice this? What did you do about it? I suppose that can be quite uncomfortable, can't it? If you don't happen to know off the top of your head what you did, or be able to remember it, that's going to be a difficult moment between perhaps your manager and the inspector, or maybe it's your manager, maybe you're the senior carer or the key worker for that individual.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of the time what you'll see is when an inspector says to you, okay, so show me what happened with this person. So I can see that, the care plan says this, I can see this happened here. What was the result? And they'll go, well, I think actually, if I remember rightly, we did, and that's really uncomfortable for that person, because also they're going to feel like the inspector might not even believe me. I'm not sure I'm recalling it correctly, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
And of course, it would be so much better just to go, oh yeah, of course. Actually, I'll just go into our incidents and accidents log. I'll pull up exactly what was done about that. I'll pull out the audit for the falls, and I'll show you what was done about that. I'll show you our learnings, our lessons learned that were shared throughout the organization, whatever it might be, right? But actually, if you pull that out and you just say, there you go, that's what we did, that's how it was effective. That makes a huge difference to both the experience of having a CQC inspection, and also for the confidence of the members of staff that are actually with them at that time. But I think that we all want to be in the situation where we know exactly what happened and what we did, but if it's not documented, the chances are so much goes on in care homes day to day that the chances of you remembering what happened 2 months ago when Flossie in room 10 had a fall, I mean, that's going to be a challenge, especially when Flossie had 4 falls in the last week. So for example, that can be something you're trying to get your head around. And so so I think actually having that evidenced is just going to make everything so much better for everybody's experience.
You talked about tying it in with that golden thread, but on the audit itself, is that something that you've had to work at in your services, trying to make that connection within your system so it's all there?
Yes, definitely. So now our system, where you put in things like incidents, accidents, falls, DOLS applications, MCAs, all those sorts of things. Everything has a pathway to follow. So for example, if there was a fall, the fall asks you, does this need to be reported? And then you would click a button and say, yes, it needs to be reported to, say, safeguarding or a CQC or riddle, for example, if it's a work member. And then it brings up another box that you complete for that report. But in addition to that, it asks the question, is there lessons learned? Who are these applicable for? Where does this need to be shared? So even when you go into that particular resident, and by the way, this particular system is the system that pulls out the trends analysis too. So everything that's in there creates that trends analysis. So you've always got that loop all in one place. Everything loops back so that you've got everything. Everything is actually able to be found very, very easily in one place that tells the whole story, not just about that incident, but all of the incidents related to that person and every action that was taken with that person, so that everything is very much person-centered, but also has that, as you mentioned, that golden thread. And you can demonstrate exactly what was done. And the system also takes in the safeguarding and the CQC notifications, so you can evidence those things there and then.
Okay, so if an inspector asked, assessor asked, could you give me the following, then you're handing it all over in one package.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. You can say, if they say, oh, I see that there was an incident here for this individual, or I'd like to see all the incidents for this individual, it's all in that one system, and they can just click through and see everything they need to see. And if, like, for example, in the instance of our inspection last week, they said to us, we'd like a folder of evidence that you can share with us. We just pull the report out of the system, save it into the folder, and shared it with them as well. So it's still all in one place.
You weren't even having that conversation face to face then, for some of the things they wanted to look at. They were just asking you, give us that, and I presume then they were going away and looking at it without somebody sat next to them.
Correct. So they would actually, when they were in with us, they picked a number of residents that they wanted to see the whole detail of. So that was absolutely everything. And then they picked some residents they wanted to see very, very specific detailed information about. And they were things that were unique, sort of pressure injuries and stuff like that, So they wanted to make sure that we were doing everything that we needed to be done from a sort of a clinical standpoint, making sure that people were cared for. And similarly with staff too, they would ask for staff folders in general, but also an example of when there was been an investigation, example of when there's been, a change of circumstances, all that sort of stuff. So they sort of they want to see great amounts of detail, and they also want to see very specific things, and they named the people that they wanted to see. So they named the residents they wanted to see, they named the staff members they wanted to see, just like they would have done if they were with us in person back in the day of being around for 5 days, 5 inspectors. But they did this remotely, asking for this digitally. But yeah, it kind of went the same way that way.
That's quite focused on their part, isn't it? Did it feel like you had the opportunity to guide them in what they looked at, or did you feel that it was very responsive?
Yeah, there was no. Back in the day when they used to come in and say, I'd like to see 3 staff files, and you'd go in and you'd go through your drawer and you pull out a couple of staff, and you go, oh, this one, I remember this one's a good one, we'll have that one. You can't do that anymore. There is absolutely no way on God's earth. No, they literally just tell you exactly what they want, and they usually pick somebody because they've been talking to people, and therefore they've got an idea of what are the ones that are going to be challenging, that they want to check that everything has been done in place. And in all fairness, it should be regardless of the circumstances of the person. So so they were very directive exactly who they wanted to see and what they wanted to see. And they would be very specific as well, what they're looking for. So you had a bit of a heads up about what it is that they would be looking for in particular. And if you didn't have it, you didn't have it.
That must mean that providers need to be very consistent in their practice. It's no good doing brilliant stuff in a couple of cases, having great records for 3 of your residents. If those don't happen to be the residents that the CQC focus on, then that's going to be a problem, isn't it? Unless you know that you're very consistent in the way that you're working.
Yeah, I think you've hit a very key point there, actually. So what I would say is that before, we might have wanted a bit of notice so we could prepare for an inspection. These days, there is so much required that you can't prepare for an inspection. That's impossible. The only way you can prepare for inspection now is through everyday practice. So unless your everyday practice isn't in itself preparing for an inspection, if you're spending a week trying to get yourself prepared for inspection, you've already blown it, because a week's worth is nowhere near enough.
Not enough.
It has to be seen. Not only do you have to have all that evidence, but that evidence needs to be seen to be a pattern of behavior. It needs to be seen that actually you've been looking at these things for a while. This isn't something you've picked up recently. And what have you been doing with that information, and how has it been developed? So the data needs to be there, and you can't fabricate.
You
6
can't
months
fill
of
those
data.
gaps in the
No,
moment.
I mean, there's absolutely no way. And I think what's really good as well is they want to see the data pretty much firsthand. What does it look like in your system?
Okay, so not, I suppose they've moved away from expecting pieces of paper, but they're not expecting you to curate what you're giving them. They want to see it as it comes out.
The whole shebang, actually. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think that's something that providers haven't completely caught up with, that we're still, a lot of people in the mindset of, well, this is what an inspection looked like 5 years ago. And actually, as I hear myself saying that, this is what an inspection looked like last time I had one.
Yes. Yes, exactly that. I think, ours was 60 years ago before the one last week. And I think that we're all, and I would suggest before last week, I was probably in the same boat, and actually believing that an inspection would be very similar in how it progressed. But even though I knew that what the detail would be very different, but how it progressed, and actually it's completely different. And I think providers can be excused to a large extent. One, because CQC hasn't always known exactly what it is they're going to be doing.
Indeed.
That seems to be coming to a place now where it's settled and things are looking much better. Named inspectors, and the key lines of inquiry and all those sorts of things, and not focusing on a little bit, but focusing on the whole thing. It's all very, very positive stuff. So actually, I think providers are going to be comfortable with some of the recent changes by and large. And what we're actually going to see is some improvements actually to those inspections happening, but at the same time, a lot has changed that providers are very unlikely to be prepared for. And those changes will be around the stuff of data, your data quality, the ease of getting your hands on information. What are the frictions when staff are asked a question? How can you demonstrate all of the activities you've been doing? And going back to that original thought, really, of that golden thread going throughout everything.
If a provider's listening to this and thinking, well, I don't know how we would fare if this were to happen to us next week or next month or whatever, what are the key things that you think people need to go away and think about? We've established that the time is now, regardless of how long ago your last inspection was, and that it's got to be a real embedded way of working. It's not something that you can just do to get yourself ready for your inspection. What would you ask them to think about first? What would they write down on that piece of paper first as they ponder how to improve things?
Well, I think you've got to start with your data quality first.
Right.
So you need to go back to all of your systems, and whatever system it is you're using, even if it's 1 or if it's 5. The truth is what is your quality like? So and address that. So if you go in that and it's absolutely spot on, it's detailed, it's accurate, and great, absolutely fantastic, you can move on to the next stage. But if it's not, that's the first place to start. And where you need to go is to say, okay, so we need to improve the data, and that usually comes from one, can be an actual data cleanse, or two, it can be making an improvement in the data collection. So that means going back to the staff and training them on exactly what it is you need them to be recording, exactly what it is you need in care plans, risk assessments, and all that. So that actually, at least moving forward, you start to collect good quality data. And then when you've got good quality data, the value of that is enormous, because you will then be able to use it so much more for other things.
I just want to pull out something you said there, because I think it was really insightful. When you said the first thing to think about is your data quality, my mind immediately went to how accurate is it? And you broadened that, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
It's not just about is what you have what actually happened. It's about, have you recorded the right thing? Have you captured everything that you should have done? That is not something I think is necessarily obvious. It clearly is to you, because you've given a lot of thought. Have I understood that correctly? That quality is quite broad
no,
thing?
you're right. You hit the nail on the head, really, because actually you're right. Of course, it needs to be accurate, right? That's good. But saying Flossie in room 10 has difficult mobility issues, right? That might be accurate, but that's no use. We need to know, what does she use? How long has she had it? What is the cause of that? How does she fare with her breathing? Are there any other issues that are comorbidities? So what you need is you need some real detail in that. So, and if it's accurate and bare, and you decide to do something like introduce an AI system, you're very likely then to get hallucinations coming out of that, because it's going to fill in the gaps. The way to prevent hallucinations is by having all of the detail for the AI. And if you have all of the details, and actually you can say to the AI, before you reply, just tell me if there's anything that I haven't told you that you need. Don't fabricate, don't make it up, don't fill in any gaps. Just tell me what additional information you need before you produce the result that I've asked for. That's another way of doing it. But of course, if you've got that data, not only just accurate, but detailed, which training staff will resolve, then actually your AI interactions will become, well, not just useful, but genuinely person-centered. And they can actually make improvements on your outcomes of things like care planning, risk assessments, because the AI will have great amounts of real detail to use to do that.
That's fascinating, and I hadn't thought about it like that. I suppose the amount of data that we capture was limited for a while by the mechanism we were using to capture it. I can remember writing things down, and there's definitely a limit of how much of that you want to do. And then perhaps it was limited by what we could usefully do with it. But now that we have new tools, AI tools potentially, to analyze it, it's sort of limitless there, isn't it? You can give the AI as much as you want. You haven't got to worry about reading it. I would not have thought of that.
And actually, the more you put in, the more insightful
it will be.
Yeah, because we use AI for our care planning, and what we found is that in some circumstances, the AI has produced more detailed, better care plans than what was produced previously. And that's not to say that teams couldn't have done them that well, but they had 150 other things to be doing too. And they were already spending between 4 and 8 hours on a care plan. But actually, the AI spent 5 minutes at most. The member of staff spent an extra 20 minutes going through it in detail to make sure it was accurate and reflective of the actual person. So within 25, 30 minutes, you've actually got a care plan which is more person-centered, more detailed, and actually takes into account everything about that person, whether it was in the care plan, the risk assessment, something the family had said during a visit. I mean, it's so much detail that you can put in there that there is no way a person could do that justice in the same amount of time, or even in 10 times the amount of time.
Just you couldn't consider that breadth of information. There's too much of it. I'm going to go back a step, I think, just as a starting point for anyone wondering what to do, what to take away. I think every system I've seen allows you to just look at the flow of care notes that are going in, I think, rather than coming out, that you can watch what your care staff are recording, can't you? And if you haven't done that for a while, perhaps that's a useful place to start and look at those with a fresh eye and think, is there more information? Is there something missing here? Is there more that we could capture about this interaction?
Yeah, and I think you know, we're thinking about sort of takeaways, if you like, for this, where somebody can go and make a start on this. And I think one of the things I would do is in conjunction with looking at that flow of information that's being input by your teams with regards to the care recording notes, is to think about it as if you was an inspector and you was coming through your home, you'd be looking for what are the gaps, right? So you could actually come in, pretend that you're sort of inspector within your head and think to yourself, okay, so where are the gaps? What do I need evidence to see? How would I go about finding the evidence? Are there any friction points? Do I need to hunt for information, or is it easy to hand? So it's those sorts of things that you can do yourself. And one of those things would be, you know, you'd look at the care recording notes, because that's data quality, but also where are the gaps, because that's gaps in detail. And actually, if you can see that there are some very, very brief notes that don't really give you much, and another thing is to look at them with the eye of, are they person-centered? They should be, of course, these days, but you know, the habits and drift over time. So it's always worthwhile rechecking these things to make sure that the teams have still got an eye on that detail and on that person-centered care recording.
And that sounds like something fairly straightforward to do. So depending on the shape and size of your organization, you might be able to ask teams to monitor each other for that sort of question.
Yes, actually, that's a really good way of doing it, because if you get teams to monitor each other, they learn from each other too. Yeah, so that's actually a really good way, because what you do is you go, oh, did you know they're doing this? We don't do that. We need to start doing that.
I think we've all seen that. Yeah,
exactly. So that's a really good way to do it, because not only will they pick up the gaps, but they'll actually see the good practice at the same time. So yeah, so that is a really good a good method actually of learning that doesn't appear to be learning. First of all, appears to be auditing or inspecting. You know,
audits are funny things, aren't they? I think sometimes we think of them as a chore and they've got to be done and we just need to get it over with, rather than having an appreciation for what we can learn from them and how we can improve.
I think actually that's probably something we've inherited, really. So historically, we've been doing audits, you know, for a long time now as a sector. And were they really much use? I don't really know that they were. You know, we were doing a lot of audits for audit's sake. We were auditing everything left, right, and centre. And I think there were certain things that we were auditing that we could see the benefit of, and other things we felt like we were just auditing for no apparent reason. Whereas I think these days now, with the amount of data that we have and the amount of data sources and data points, when we audit something, we can actually take out of that audit a real lesson. So rather than us living with that old inherited sense of audits are just a tick box, they don't really do anything for us, we need to re-look at what audits actually do for us as a care home, as a provider of care, to actually say, actually, you know, the audit will highlight those things that we're not doing. And then we can actually look into the data to see exactly where did that go wrong? How can we address that best? What can we do to learn our lessons? How can we best share that information? And how can we move forward having made those changes and evidence it?
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because it always takes us back to where we started, that what we need. Yeah, that we need to be able to demonstrate that we are doing what we say we're doing. If it's not documented, it's not done. Is so fundamental, isn't it?
That'll always be fundamental. It has been fundamental for many, many years. You know, in fact, we got a big poster up in the staff rooms and said if it was not written down, it didn't happen. That's what it says.
Oh, wow.
And I think that's a real lesson. So if you don't evidence something, then how can you say it happened? It's just word of mouth, and that's no evidence at all. So everything has to be evidenced by being written down at the time, and followed through, so that you can see where did that go from there. Because whenever we do, for example, even a lessons learned, that's a really good outcome. All right. So you've gone through a whole process and you've created the lessons learned and you've shared it across the organization. Revisit and say, after we shared that lessons learned, did we see an improvement? It's a bit like project management, isn't it, really? You have the whole life cycle, but then it starts again from the beginning that says, okay, so let's go back to the beginning and review again, and then start the process again. So we can actually do exactly the same sort of cyclical process to ensure that everything that we're doing is feeding back into the continuous improvement of the organization.
Trying to create those golden threads everywhere, connecting everything together. I really like that. I think that's a lovely phrase and describes really well how we want people to think. I'm not doing all these individual tasks because they're on a list and I have to do them.
Yes.
How do they join up? How do they connect to each other?
Yeah, that's it. That's right. I think it's actually that's actually what you want, isn't it? You want to see how everything that we do, all these various pieces of activity all over the place, they actually contribute to the whole, and they should all be connecting together to create a benefit. And that's what we need, and that's what we need to demonstrate as well. And I think one of the ways, just thinking about steps, is one of the ways in which we can encourage people to do these things from fresh, is for providers to think about one area that they want to do this in. So it could be falls or weight monitoring or medication, but just pick one thing and then build yourself that feedback loop, where you're you're capturing the data, then you're reviewing it, and then you're looking at what it is that you found, and you're acting on that, and then you're evidencing that, and then you're evidencing the outcomes. Then go back again, look at what the data has, review that, act on what you find, evidence the outcome. So just pick one thing and start that process, because once you've got one thing working in that way really well, and you're satisfied that that's working, it's embedded, it's so much easier to replicate. And it's also so much easier to tie to the next one that you're doing that with too. Because, if there's an issue with somebody's weight or somebody's medication, then could have an impact on anything from a fall to a UTI. So, these are the things that need to be telling a whole story, not standing alone as a piece of data on its own.
But that's your top tip, is it make it work for one thing?
Yeah,
absolutely. And then
absolutely.
everybody can see it in action.
Yes, and I think as a top tip, make it work for one thing and then roll it out step by step. But going back to what you said earlier on about that whole circular thing and things not being a singular piece, it's to ensure that staff are on board with this. And the way that you make staff on board with this is by just explaining it to them. So if you tell them, right, why you're doing it, that's all. Instead of them then thinking that this is just another piece of documentation or more bureaucracy, from the boss, or what you're actually going to be doing is you're going to say, so what happens is we're actually going to see how this works. We're going to see how we can make improvements, and it's going to be a continuous cycle, which helps us in our own continuous improvement. So it's actually going to benefit the people that we care for directly. And it's also going to benefit us as an organization, and it's going to benefit us as individual care staff on the ground, because we're going to make improvements to the lives of the people that we care for.
What a brilliant statement. Thank you so much, Kevin. It can be challenging, I think, to do this on your own, can't it? Or to know where to start if you're a relatively small service and you feel very aware of the lack of a big operations department behind you to help you. So I think that was really useful. Thank you. Samir, I saw you nodding along a lot of the time. Is there anything there that you want to pick up on or that you felt really resonated with you?
I was busily
just making notes.
Writing down and making lots of notes, because a lot of it really did resonate. Thank you, Kevin, for such an insightful look into how you've gone about hopefully having a really, really successful inspection that hopefully gets you to that I'm sure well-deserved outstanding rating. Just picking up on a couple of things you mentioned there. I think we speak a lot about within our community in the DigiHive around this good data in, giving us good data out to make really good decisions. And I think I've probably viewed that from a lens of making really good business decisions and good decisions for our residents. But I think very much one takeaway for me is actually that good data out now is so meaningful and impactful to the inspectors and the inspection process. So thank you for sharing that. And it's kind of like that golden thread you mentioned, the good data in, that golden thread then leads us that good data out that we can then use to hopefully showcase the amazing care that's being delivered in our services. And I think another thing that really shone through there was that idea of confidence and the team being really confident when faced with the inspector knocking on the door, or the assessor, as they wanted to be known as on your day. So thank you. So thank you so much for sharing some of your amazing work and some of the things you've put into process in your care services. And I think for me, I don't think many providers and many providers we speak to in the community, I don't think they struggle because there's a lack of care. I think everyone in this sector really does care. But I think people do struggle because what they know about their service kind of is up here and not down there. And so again, that notion of making sure you've written it down really resonated with a lot of people we speak to in the community as well. And the fact now that inspections have changed, and the expectation now within an inspection, I think, is much more about clarity and confidence in this sort of evidence in real time, is really important, and something probably we all need to think about getting better at, and doing some of those reps with the team to get them prepared for when they do come and knocking on the door. So if anybody's listening today and they're thinking we're not quite there yet, which I'm sure most providers aren't, because sometimes we don't learn these things, we don't know what we don't know. That's kind of why we built the DigiHive community. We don't want you to have to sit there and worry and wonder for when the inspector does knock. There's a community here where we can all share and learn from one another, and see how others ahead of us in the journey and borrow some of the brilliance, like Kevin's kindly shared from us today about what he's done over in his services. So if the conversation resonated with you today, the next step for you is to join up with our DigiHive community for lots more conversations and lots more learning for us all to do. But all that remains for me is to obviously thank Robin, our wonderful host, once again for today. And Kevin, your time and your insights and your knowledge is so gratefully received by us and everyone in the community. Thank you so much for sparing us your afternoon.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully what I've learned over the last week since our inspection can help others out there as well. So yes, thank you very much. It's been great.
We've always